Good afternoon and welcome to How to Be an Agile Leader with Psychological Flexibility. It has just gone 3:30. I see some of you connecting. So those of you that have been here before, welcome back. Those of you that are here for the first time, you're very welcome. Just before we get started, I'm just going to go through a few things to let you know how this is going to work. So we're going to be here for the next hour. I'd just love it if you could introduce yourself in the chat box, if you could let me know who you are, and if you are willing, perhaps why you're here today. I'd love to know what brought you to this webinar, and I will try to consider that as we talk through things within the next hour. So while you're getting sorted with the chat box, I'll just explain things as I said. So just at the top of the screen here, you will see a follow button. That will enable you to follow me on Crowdcast, the channel that hosts all the webinars that I provide. What happens when you hit the follow button? You will be notified of every webinar that I will be running just 10 minutes before each webinar is going to start. And that means you will be able to go back and watch those on demand when it suits you. So Nuala, thank you for sharing. Nuala, you're a nurse manager, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. Love to hear why you're here today. What brings you to know more about being an agile leader? Because again, what I want for the hour that you're going to spend with me, I want this to be as relevant as possible. So I mentioned that you'll be able to watch webinars on demand. This webinar is currently live for those people attending. Each of the webinars are automatically recorded and they are available on demand. So those people that are signed up and can't make it, they'll be able to watch this webinar immediately after this has finished. And you also will be able to go back and watch the recording, or if you want, go back and have a look at some of the other webinars that I have provided. So far, Nuala is the only person that's brave enough to jump in. No, she's not. Roisin, thank you very much for joining me. I know some of you that are here today met you in person. Others I won't have. I'll have maybe perhaps met you virtually. Louise, great corporate services manager. That's two of you at least from care homes and from the same care home organisation. And I am well aware of Hutchinson Care Homes, have done a little bit of work in the distant past. And Sarah, thank you for joining me as well. So just when I'm having a look at why you're here, so to benefit the team and service users in a positive way, to improve your knowledge of being a strong leader. And Sarah's going to be managing staff in the future and would like to learn more about leading others. So thank you for joining us and for signing up for this webinar. So let's just talk about or look at the areas that I'm going to cover within the next hour. So the areas of focus, and sorry, Nuala, I've seen, so Nuala, I've always worked as a staff nurse, and the staff nurse manager is a new role. So trying to develop skills and knowledge to take a great team forward and enhance the foundations. Great aspirations for this hour, and it's my job now to help you to try to get there. So if we look at our areas of focus, some of you might find what I'm going to talk about today perhaps a little bit different, and that is absolutely my objective. My objective is to talk about things that some people don't ordinarily talk about, but in talking about those things, I hope what you're going to find is you'll have new and improved leadership skills that you will find that you would have been lost without having these. So the areas of focus this afternoon are to look at how your emotions could be impacting on every area of your life. So as a leader at work, and also in your leisure time and in your relationships, perhaps even in your health. Secondly, what I want to do is I want to explain how we can measure your perceptions of your ability to manage your own emotions and those of other people. So looking at how we can measure what we do with our emotions. And also the title of today's workshop was How to Be an Agile Leader with Psychological Flexibility. So we're going to be talking about what psychological flexibility is and also how we go about achieving that. Just before we go any further, I just want to pop back to the initial cover slide, and I just want to look at this quote that I've included from McKinsey & Co. So to build and lead an agile organization, it's crucial that senior leaders develop new mindsets and capabilities to transform themselves, their teams, and the organization. So the reason that we're talking about agile leadership and being an agile leader is there's lots of conversations today about agile organizations and agile leadership. We live in what is described, and I don't know whether you'll have heard this before, but we live in what is called a VUCA world, VUCA. And VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Okay, so Aris isn't able to write in the comment part of our iPad. Well, Aris, you're very welcome. Thank you for joining us. Aris, I do believe you and I have met before, so it's lovely that you have come back here to join me virtually. If I hope maybe if you've got any other questions that you want to include in the chat box, feel free to phone Louise and ask her to pop those in. So really this quote about agile leadership, we're living in this volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous world. What we know in the last 2 years is organizations are having to change and adapt very quickly. But for organizations to change and adapt very quickly, they need leaders and people within organizations that can do that. Because organizations aren't made up of robots, they're made up of people, particularly those of you joining me today, you're very heavily reliant on people. So leaders have the ability to influence, to create the change, or perhaps not to create the change and to stand still. What has happened in the last 2 years is organizations are changing at a much quicker pace than they ever did before. So change has accelerated, and that is continuing to do so moving forward. So our expectations as consumers, as users of services and facilities, we expect things to change. We all rely on technology today. We rely on advances of that technology. And so we need to be aware of our own customers' expectations are changing. Likewise, your expectations of me here today are changing and expanding. So if there are things that you'd like to hear or know about, please feel free again to use the chat box. So we know what it is, we know why we're having this conversation today, or at least the reason why I've been thinking about this, because agility is something that's being talked about all of the time. Agile leaders, agile organizations. But really for a lot of people, do we know how to go about doing that? And so what I'd like to share with you today is, this is a model, if you want to call it that, from McKinsey & Co. So those of you that have joined these sessions before, you'll know that what I like to do is I like to share some good practice that I've identified out there, new ways of thinking. And then what I will do is I will demonstrate in a practical way how you can go about achieving this. So the session is almost in 2 halves. So I'm going to be providing you now with some knowledge about agile leadership. So agile leadership is a leadership style, and that is about being able to Change and adapt your leadership style dependent on the situation or the circumstances. So here, in terms of the McKinsey & Co model, they have broken Agile leadership into 3 key areas: transforming yourself, transforming your team, and transforming your organization. So if you're going to be an Agile leader and we're going to create an Agile organization, back to what I said, we need to start with leadership. So if you're going to transform yourself, then we need to move from certainty, that as leaders, we know what's going to happen, we know what to expect, we have all the answers, which is what most leaders feel they need to do and respond with their teams, to a way of fostering innovation. Just because we do something today doesn't mean that we have to do that in the same way in the future. So transforming yourself is looking at new ways of doing things and fostering creativity, trying to look at you being even adaptable as an individual. Thinking about even, I'd like you to think about now is, am I an adaptable leader? Do I like change? Do I seek change out? Or actually, when change comes along, am I reasonably good at adapting to that change and developing a plan for that change? Because transforming yourself now is about not being certain, looking for those changes and fostering innovation within yourself. It's also about moving from authority to partnership. So as leaders, in terms of traditional organizations, we see a hierarchy. You as a leader being at the top of that hierarchy, middle to top of that pyramid, and you see yourself being in a position of authority. Really, the change now is about thinking about working in partnership. If I look at this list from McKinsey & Co, any of you that are familiar with Covey's 7 habits of highly effective leaders, a lot of this takes me back to Covey's 7 habits. So this isn't about I'm in control, I'm in authority, and I have all the answers. This is about fostering collaboration. It's about working with others. So as a leader, are you working in silos within your organization? Are you working in silos within those teams? Or are you working collaboratively across teams? Are you fostering relationships and partnerships with other leaders in your organization and with other teams? Or are you simply concerned with looking after your own team and achieving your own targets? It's also in terms of transforming yourself is moving from scarcity to abundance. Again, one of Covey's 7 habits looks at the abundance mentality. And here what we're doing is, in terms of transforming yourself, is fostering the idea of value creation, is that in everything that we do, we create value. So thinking about for yourselves, what value am I creating for my team? What value is the team creating for the organization? And what value is the organization creating for those people that use our services? So we're very much focusing on that sense of value that we create, trying, even if we can, even to measure that. So it's about developing those skills in terms of transforming yourselves. In terms of transforming your teams, it's helping teams to work in agile ways. And in terms of helping teams to work in agile ways, there are things that we will need to be considering in terms of the team cannot be agile unless we help them to be agile. We all have ways of doing things. As humans, we're inflexible in many ways. So we want teams to be flexible in terms of how they work in terms of processes and practices, how they work with each other, how they work with other members of other teams, for example. Teams also need to embrace a design thinking and business model innovation. So we need to set up systems and procedures that allow people to be thinking about new ways of working, thinking about creative thinking, not having the mindset of, well, we've done this way, and so we're going to continue to do it this way. Or the old adage, if it's not broken, don't fix it. So I said, as humans, we can be inflexible. Your team may be resistant to change, and that is because they've always done things the way they've done them. Fear of the unknown. And fear is one of those things. Fear activates the amygdala, and the amygdala, when it's activated, prevents effective thought and action. So we need to transform our teams to take them into new ways of doing things that they are hopefully going to be comfortable in doing that. Transforming the organization is about purpose. Something, if you've joined these webinars before, you'll have heard me talking about. So January's webinar, for those of you that are interested, you can go back and watch January's webinar on this facility, Crowdcast. January's webinar was all about purpose. It was all about having that purpose at work. So an organization, in terms of agile leadership, needs to be clear on its purpose. In McKinsey & Co.'s term, it's what your North Star is. Your purpose is not what you do, it is the benefit that you bring to your end users. What benefit does your organization bring to your end users? Is everybody in your team aware of that? Because if we know what the benefit is to the end user, and if we're firmly focused on that, then the change in adaptability with the team becomes much easier because their focus is on that purpose. And we need to keep our focus on that purpose, to be talking about that shared purpose on a daily basis. Design then is applying the principles and practices of agile organizational design. And also culture is shaping an agile organizational culture. What I'm going to do today in terms of agile leadership, in the 60 minutes that I'm spending with you today, I can't cover all of those, but I'm certainly going to look at transforming yourself. And I'm going to look at certainly the purpose and the culture end of transforming your organization. So please feel free either to use the ask a question or get involved in the chat box. There will be a point, if you've joined these before, where you will realize that this session will become very interactive. Okay, so the qualities then of an agile leader are something now for you to be considering. The qualities that you are showing is Forbes asked 15 leaders what they felt were the qualities of an agile leader. And so we now have in front of us 15 key qualities of agile leaders that they found through asking leaders about this. Without going through all the words that are here, we can see keywords that are popping up again that we've already highlighted in looking at the McKinsey & Co. model in terms of an agile leader. Collaboration being one. The other that I'd like to highlight is about being curious. So as a leader, adopting that fostering innovation mindset is about being curious. When somebody says something to you about doing things in a different way, is maybe listening to that. Being curious and thinking about, why do we do it this way? Is this working for us, and are we getting those results? It's also about adapting, being able to adapt and flex to those different situations that are going on, to be able to adapt your style, be able to adapt your behavior. And it's also about being resilient as a leader. I don't need to tell you, I think you people joining today, you're all in management positions, that I would say one thing that you're all possibly sure of, I say possibly now, and I'd love to hear that in the chat box, is how resilient do you believe you've been over the last 2 years? You've motored on, you've created many changes, you've adapted to new ways of working, both for the people that work in your teams, but also those people who use your organization. So how do you feel about being resilient? Do you feel that you've been resilient, or do you feel at times you have been struggling with your own resilience? If you're brave enough to disclose some of that, I'd love to hear some of that in the chat box. Also, the qualities of an agile leader are learning continuously. Well, again, those of you that have signed up for this webinar, watching it now, or some people will be watching the recording, is that you are here because you want to learn. Learning for me is an everyday activity. I can learn every day from others. I will possibly learn from you today in terms of some of your comments. But we need to have that open book. We need to believe that there is more to learn. We need to be open as a human, open to what other people have to say, open to what might be showing up for us as a leader, and also accepting and being present. So being in the moment. Our mind is a great time traveler. It travels back in the future and into the past. And so what we want to do is ensure that we've got that skill of being able to bring us back into the present, accept what's going on, and to be able to deal with that. Also, we have about creating inclusive and empowered teams, empowerment being a key word. I think that we're continuing to hear leaders wanting their teams to be empowered, and cooperating courageously. So being curious and being courageous is are two skills as a leader that we need to develop. There may be some of you that may be here today or listening to this recording that may feel you might have a little way to go in terms of being courageous, and I think that's a great start, because that's back to acceptance of where you are at the moment. So I'm hoping now that these qualities of an agile leader are giving you something to think about in terms of where you might be. In terms of being an agile leader, and if you think many of those qualities are relating to behaviors. Our observable behaviors, those things that I see or hear you doing in terms of your behaviors and your actions, they come from a variety of different things. They come from your personality. They come from your beliefs. Those beliefs may come from also how you've been brought up as a child, the schools that you went to, and the churches that you are involved in. And so we all have beliefs about how we should behave. We all have a set of values of which we believe in, the moral compass for us in terms of how we behave. There's attitudes that we have to others. So yeah, Roisin, I'm just popping back to the chat box, is showing how quickly we managed to adapt and continue to offer professional and connected services. This has been done by being present and looking at what was required at the time to best support you. So being client focused is key in this. And if we're clear on our shared purpose and we're being client focused, then change and agility will come. It's interesting to know sometimes also what's holding us back. So I want you to start thinking about your own behaviors, why you behave as you do. What I see are behaviors that are coming from what is showing up internally for you. So what is showing up for you inside? Those are emotions that may be showing up for you, and how you might be responding to those are those observable behaviors that I might see. So in terms of those behaviors, I use something called the Trait Emotional Intelligence Model. The Trait Emotional Intelligence Model was created by Dr. Kevin Petrides, and he looks at emotional intelligence in 4 factors: well-being, self-control, emotionality, and sociability. He then breaks those factors down into facets, and there are a total of 15 different facets. So these look at how we respond to our own emotions, the impact that those might have on ourselves and those have on those other relationships that we have within work. So what we can see here is well-being looks at happiness, optimism, and self-esteem. So if you think of it, I've shown you the McKenzie model in terms of Agile Leadership. We've looked at 15 different qualities that was identified by Forbes, and now I'm showing you another model. I'm just helping you to see different ways to be thinking about leadership. So you may even start to think about now, well, what are my levels of how satisfied am I with life at the moment? How optimistic am I about the future? And how happy am I about my self-esteem? That's the judgments that I make about myself. So how confident am I as an individual? Self-control, we have 3 facets here again. Emotional regulation. How well am I able to regulate my own emotions? So when emotions show up internally, how able am I to control those or to regulate those? Impulse control, how impulsive am I? Do I go on gut instinct? Do I need facts and figures in order to make decisions? If I'm not very impulsive, I like a clear plan and I like to have data to make my decisions. How able am I as a leader to manage my stress levels? What kind of strategies do I have to manage stress? And how often does stress show up for me? Emotionality, we look at empathy. How able am I to put myself in somebody else's shoes and look at the world from their perspective? Emotional perception. How able am I to read and to understand my own emotions or those of others? If I have an undersupply of emotional perception, I'll feel a little emotionally confused about my own emotions and not feel able to read the emotions of others. Emotional expression is how comfortable I am expressing my emotions. And again, if I have an undersupply of emotional expression, I would not feel comfortable expressing my emotions to others, particularly in work. Relationships is how comfortable am I starting and maintaining relationships? So I'm asking you these questions. I'd like you to be thinking about those for yourself. Sociability. Again, we have 3 factors here for sociability. Emotional management now is about your ability to manage the emotions of other people. So do you have the ability to turn other people's emotions around? So if somebody comes to you feeling frustrated and angry, are you able to calm them down? If somebody comes to you sad and upset, are you able to turn that emotion around and make that individual feel better? Assertiveness, do you believe that you are frank and forthright? Or do you believe perhaps that you might be the individual that feels that other people's opinions are more important than your own or more valid than your own? Are you the person that will sit in the room and listen and not say anything until everybody else has had their say? And social awareness. Are you that individual that perhaps is a little anxious in different social situations? Or are you a social butterfly that loves to go into different social situations, talk to different people, and thrive in those different environments? This model also has 2 independent facets. Adaptability, something that we've already talked about today, is how adaptable am I? Am I the person that is seeking out change all the time, or am I very resistant to change? Do I not like change, but perhaps if change happens, I will find ways of coping with it? And self-motivation is, Am I driven internally or externally? Am I driven by my own internal standards? Do I set my own internal standards, judge myself by those standards, and judge others by those standards? Am I a little bit of a perfectionist? Or am I performing much better when I have external factors influencing me? Goals, targets, recognition and reward, perhaps. So this is a model that I find very useful when helping leaders to be more agile and to develop their psychological flexibility. When I use this model, this model I said was owned by Dr. Kevin Petrides. The model is now also used by Thomas International, who I partner with. And so an individual leader would complete a questionnaire and they would receive about a 40-page report that will provide some narrative about how well you perform in each of those different facets. What you see here is an overview of one page that shows all of the 15 facets together on the one page. What you will see from this is there are 3 wheels here. The inner wheel is identifying that an individual may have an undersupply. In this case, we can see that with impulse control. These are not percentages, they are percentiles, and they are showing how well you believe you perform in each of these facets against the general population, because they are percentiles. So we see the inner wheel being the undersupply, the middle area being an average supply, the average supply going from 30 to 69 percentile, and then 70 to 99 percentile in an oversupply. What we see with this sample report is this individual is performing in both the undersupply, average supply, and oversupply in all 15 facets. What we do is I talk to the individual about what these mean. So I've already given you some examples in talking through the different facets. So this individual is very comfortable expressing emotion. They're at the 81st percentile. They are that type of leader that will be wearing their heart on their sleeve. This model views you being in the oversupply or the undersupply as having, there are positives, upsides to being there, and there can be some downsides. It's about being aware of what those are and then maybe flexing your behavior in relation to those to suit different situations. So we can see here even that this individual is in the 51st percentile in terms of emotional perception. As much as the average person, they are able to read other people's emotions as well as their own. We see that they are in the 99th percentile in terms of happiness, so they are very content and satisfied with their life at the moment. And so we can see from that one that if you imagine someone that is very happy and cheerful and content with life at the moment, as a leader, if you are that person, people may find it difficult to take you seriously. They may believe that you have a very tainted view of the world, particularly if the people that you're dealing with or communicating with have an undersupply. So what this tool is helping you to do is to understand yourself and understand your interactions with other people if they're at different ends of the scale. So today what I wanted to do was to talk about how to be an agile leader with psychological flexibility. And I wanted you to understand how your emotions could be impacting in all areas of your life. I wanted you to understand how we can measure your perception of your response to your emotions. And this is one way of doing that. This is called the Thomas International TQ, which stands for Trait Emotional Intelligence Questionnaire. So this is measuring your levels of emotional intelligence. And at the end of that, what we do is we agree, what do you believe are the areas that you would like to improve? Which of the areas do you feel are not working for you at the moment? And the next step of that then is, because today is about developing agile leadership with psychological flexibility. And psychological flexibility is the ability for an individual to take action or behave in a way that brings them satisfaction, even in the presence of uncomfortable thoughts, feelings, and experiences. What we looked at the qualities of an agile leader. We looked at resilience. I asked you to tell me how you felt about your own resilience. And really what we know is research has identified that psychological flexibility is the cornerstone of psychological health and well-being. So this is a skill that is required, a critical skill that is required for leaders to develop, that helps them to change and adapt their responses in different situations. So I talked about being rigid. So the opposite of flexible is unflexible or rigid. And so in developing psychological flexibility, there is a point of view, a tool developed by Dr. Kevin Polk, a clinical psychologist. And he has developed this point of view, which we know scientifically proven to improve psychological flexibility. And because when we use this ACT matrix, we operate from a respectful point of view, I would like to ask your permission to share this point of view with you. So if you don't mind, in the chat box, do I have your permission to share this point of view with you? Is that something you would be willing to experience? I'm just going to hold fire for the moment and let you just answer that in the chat box. Brilliant. Thank you, Dawn. Dawn knows how this works. So thank you for that, Dawn. And Matthew, go for it. Thank you, Matthew. Delighted. Yes, Roisin, great. Yeah, a resounding yes is wonderful. Thank you. So this is where we're going to get interactive. So thanks for that. And Aris has got her keypad working. Thank you. That's brilliant, Aris. So you're going to get your fingers ready at the keyboard, because I'm going to be asking you a series of questions now, and I'm going to be recording the answers. So I'm going to demonstrate now how, as leaders, you can develop your own psychological flexibility. So what we have here at the top of this matrix is our 5 senses experiencing. That is what you see, hear, touch, taste, and smell in the world. At the bottom of this line, we have internal experiencing. Those are things like thoughts, feelings, emotions, memories, and sensations that you experience in the internal world that we will not see or hear. But what we know is that when we experience in the external world with our 5 senses, those do create internal experiences. And internal experiences will create experiences in the external world. In other words, how we behave. So what we have on the left here is we have relief in terms of how we approach things, and also satisfaction on the right. And so when we use this ACT matrix, we always start in the bottom right of the matrix by asking the question, who is important to you? So in the chat box, I'd like to understand from you, who are the important people? Dawn's on a roll, and great, thank you, Dawn. So Dawn is saying her mum, and you're all going fast and furiously. So Sarah is saying children. I'm going to try and keep up. Family from Roisin, and family friends from Matthew. Anybody else that's important to you? Who else might be important to you? Thank you, Roisin, yourself. And Dawn is saying her cat. Anybody else that might be important to you? Are your work colleagues important to you? Maybe not. You tell me, not for me to tell you. So anybody else that might be important to you? Feel team at work. Okay, so my team, colleagues, residents within the care home, residents and their families. Great, thank you, Nuala. Over here now, and specifically my team on work and customers. Excellence and service users. Brilliant, thank you. So, okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to move over to the bottom left of the matrix. And the question here now for you is, what unwanted stuff do you notice showing up in the internal world? What internal experiences do you have that are unwanted? Children, work, colleagues, brilliant. Thank you, Aris. So now what I want you to do is I want you to be sharing what's the unwanted stuff that shows up for you. So I will say sometimes frustration shows up for me. And Roisin is saying worry sometimes shows up. And for Sarah, sometimes negative thoughts show up. And stress shows up for Aris. And guilt shows up for Dawn. How quickly we are populating this. So some negative self-talk is showing up there as well. Anything else that might be showing up that is unwanted? So sometimes even as a leader, I don't know, maybe whether any of you sometimes feel, okay, so Matthew, you feel conflict. Sometimes, okay, the Sarah, imposter syndrome. Okay, so poor morale. Anger, and sometimes as a leader it's a very lonely place to be. So we can feel lonely and we can feel isolated perhaps because we are the leader and we need to be showing that example. So thinking about now, there's stuff for all of us. How easy it was for us to populate that bottom left of the matrix. Those are a normal range of emotions that we all experience. In the top part of this matrix now, top left, the question here is, in the external world, what would I see or hear you doing to get relief from the unwanted stuff? So when frustration or worry or negative thoughts, or when you're feeling stressed, or when you're feeling guilty, or when you're feeling conflicted, what would I see or hear you doing? So Sarah is saying deep breathing, be open and honest. And Roisin says exercise and snipe and meditate and mindfulness, seek support, walk in the country, and argue. And sometimes exercise, good food, conversation. Okay, so music even I might be to get rid of, and Sarah walking the dog. So the important thing here is I'm asking that question. So what is it I would see you doing to get rid of the unwanted stuff? So just looking for a pen here. So I'm just illustrating here that when this stuff here shows up, this is what we would see you doing. Okay, so now what I want to do is just get my pen back. Great, wonderful. Over here now in the top right of this matrix, I want to ask you the question now. If you think of those people that are important to you, what would I see you doing in the external world that would bring you satisfaction in your approach to those relationships? So what would I see or hear you doing? So here we have, just get going here again now. Rushing saying you could maybe journal, and you're maybe thinking about journaling your thoughts. Dawn is going to go for wine and make muffins. Dawn, I'm going to join you on that one. I like the sound of that. A family dinner and spending time together and listening and good communication and happiness, collaboration, time together, sharing burdens. Just going to run out of some room. All of these are all very relevant. So family day out, and working alongside the kids. Brilliant. Okay, I'm just going to make this fit a little better here. So what we want to be doing now is just to be thinking here, really, we are doing these things because they bring us satisfaction. They bring us closer to these people. And on the other side here, often what we find is when we do things to bring us relief, they will sometimes bring us more of this stuff down here. So when we think about psychological flexibility, just coming back to my definition, just to let you see that again, is the ability for an individual to take action or behave in a way that brings them satisfaction, things that we would do on the right side of the matrix, even in the presence of uncomfortable thoughts, feelings, and experiences. So, psychological flexibility is knowing who's important, noticing this stuff that's showing up inside, and coming here because we know it brings us satisfaction. That is what brings us that flexibility. So the question I have for you in terms of developing psychological flexibility is, do you think in the next week or so, as a leader, you would have the opportunity to notice who is important to you, the unwanted stuff that shows up that you'd prefer not to experience, what behaviors you do that give you relief from the unwanted stuff, and also to notice the behaviors that bring you satisfaction? Because the key in the middle of this matrix is me noticing. That is you as an individual noticing those four things, asking yourself those 4 questions, noticing those. Do you think you'd have an opportunity in the next week or so to notice who's important, notice the unwanted stuff showing up, notice how you want to respond to the unwanted stuff to get relief from it, and notice what you want to do to get satisfaction? Do you think you would have the opportunity to notice? Is that something that you would like to do? Is that something you feel that would benefit you? If you do, I'd love to hear from it in the chat box. Dawn, thank you. Yes, great. Excellent. Thank you. So as you continue yes, I can really see how this could help, Sarah. Dawn and I know that this is workable What I told you, yes, absolutely. Being conscious of it will be a weird experience. And this ACT matrix comes from behavioral science. And I'm teaching you to use something today that is very simple to use. It just requires you to notice and to practice that skill. The objective of this is you developing the psychological flexibility in yourself. So rather than going to the automated behaviors of those things that you do to get relief, is instead of spending time getting relief, is spending more of your time doing things that bring you satisfaction. Because ultimately, psychological flexibility, we said, is proven to be the cornerstone of psychological health and well-being. And that is because when we're more flexible, we're living a more fulfilled life. Satisfied and fulfilled life is what we're aiming for. So you can use this matrix in terms of your own personal life, but you can also do this in terms of your own work life. Now, it wouldn't be one of these webinars if I just didn't move to showing you here a second loop. So if we're trying to develop agile leadership, to develop agile organizations, what I'd said is I would help you in terms of transforming yourself. That's learning to use the ACT matrix. It could be also having the emotional intelligence questionnaire done for yourself so that you can find out where you're at the moment. Those of you that are interested in having a chat about any of that, you'll see the little button at the bottom of your screens, which is Get in Touch. And that will take you through to an online booking system to book a 30-minute complimentary session to talk about how potentially I might be able to help develop your agile leadership or psychological flexibility skills. So here I'm just going to now do what we refer to in these terms as a second loop. And in this second loop, this matrix is similar, but we focused on the me before. Now we're going to look at the we. So this is a we matrix, again created by Dr. Kevin Polk, and it's called the Pro-Social Matrix. And I hope you will give me permission to share this with you also. So if we're now thinking about transforming the team, this is the piece around culture. So it's the same matrix, 5 senses behaviors, mind at the bottom. And really the bottom right here, what we're asking is what's the group's shared purpose? So if you think about your team and you're an agile leader, what is your shared purpose as a group? Or what do you think are the important things within your team, the important things within the group? What are some of the things that they might say? While you're getting ready to type, I will add a few things in here that I think if we think about agile organizations and some of the things that we've talked about, what your team might say is teamwork is important, collaborating is important. We talked about earlier, empowerment might be something for them that's important. Sarah's saying they would say communication is important. Anybody else maybe in the chat box, what would your team say is important to them? To them as a team. Okay, so to learn and open and honest, brilliant. To be available, some might say transparent, respectful is what they might say. So we could use this, you could use this with your team and really ask the team what is important to them. This is, while I've just showed you the ACT matrix, the ACT matrix is a powerful tool for you, but you'll just be amazed at what you would get from this. I really would encourage you to try it. So if I move over to the bottom bottom left of the matrix, I'm now asking you, in the internal world, what social unwanted stuff do we notice showing up? So when we're a collective within the team, we're working together as a team, what's some of the unwanted stuff that shows up, emotions that show up when we work together as a team? So I'm thinking of Matthew earlier talked about conflict. So sometimes when we're working with other people, some conflict can show up inside. Sarah thinks some frustration shows up. What else might be showing up? So anxiety for members of the team might be showing up. Frustration, great. Clashes in personality. So people believing that, we can't get on together. Jealousy showing up as well. Again, I talked about, some people may feel not part of the team, so they may feel isolated. Even though they're with the team and part of the team, they may feel ignored, not valued. So it is amazing when you ask team members what might be the unwanted. What might be the unwanted is a safe way to ask that question rather than what is showing up. Again, so we're looking at this as a team. This is the we matrix. So what unwanted, when the unwanted social stuff is showing up, what are the things we might see team members doing? They may feel overpowered. Okay, that's a great one, Nola. Overpowered. They may also feel overpowered and overwhelmed. What would we see individuals doing? So conflict management. So what would we see people doing? Scrolling on the phone. So we might see team members scrolling on their phone because they just don't feel that the conversation is relevant, or they may decide to leave, pack their bags and go and work somewhere else. They may be on sick leave. Dawn, thank you also. They may gossip about other colleagues. Matthew, wonderful. Silence and anger. So what would we see when people are angry? Matthew, what would we see in teams when anger is showing up? What might we see when anger is showing up? We might see some swearing and shouting. Yep, shouting and raised voices. What this matrix is doing, it's giving the team the ability to stand back and to notice what is going on within the team. So remembering here, when we're looking at this, I'm just making the connections for you to say when these things show up within the team, here's what we might see the team doing. Now I'm going to come again to, sorry, I'm just trying to squeeze this in so you'll see my screen moving. So here what we now have is in the top right, I want to ask the same or similar question before, and that is, what behaviours do we notice that would bring satisfaction towards our shared purpose? So in other words here, the question is, if teamwork and collaboration and empowerment and communication and being open and honest are useful, is what the team feel are important, how do we bring those into action? What action could we see that would bring us satisfaction in relation to what's important and that shared purpose? So great. So good practice. And I see Roisin talked about bullying earlier. I'll add that over in the other side. You're right. So bullying would go on. What else would we say? So as leaders, we could say perhaps team meetings might help in terms of the communication, ARIS training. What else could we do? Okay, so praising staff, share concerns. So an opportunity for people to share, which is why this matrix works so well with teams, because when you use it with them, you're giving them the opportunity to talk about all of this stuff. thanking them for hard work. And again, when I'm thinking about a team, that's also even the team thanking each other for hard work, that this all doesn't fall to the leader. So what we're trying to do is to help people to understand here, these are the things that are important. How do we convert that into action? What are the things that we need to do that will bring us satisfaction as a team? So staff appreciation days, great. So I'm just getting my pen back here. So, oops, didn't do that too well. Okay, get that back. Yeah, okay, here we go. So let me just populate more of what you've got. So yes, Louise, staff appreciation days and role model behaviour. So again, really what I'm asking you to do here when we look at this matrix is to ask, do you think, as let's say as a team of leaders that you'd have, because I know some of you are coming from one organization today, do you think in the next week or so that we would have the opportunity to notice what our shared purpose is and what's important to us as a group, to notice the social unwanted stuff showing up, to notice how we want to respond to that social unwanted stuff, and to notice the behaviors then, that what action could we do that would bring satisfaction to our team. So thinking about the areas of focus for today were to help you to look at how your emotions may be impacting on yourself and the areas of your life, is for you to understand how we can measure your perception of your own emotional responses. That was the Thomas International TQ. And also how to develop psychological flexibility, and also using the ACT matrix. And also what I've done is I very briefly introduced you to the pro-social matrix, the WE matrix, that would help you transform teams and help you to transform the organization. I realize I am a little over time, so what I'd like to do is to thank you for joining me today and taking the hour out. Dawn, thank you for attending. It's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for taking the time out. And to all of you, before you go, I'd love a little bit of feedback. As I said, every day's a school day. I'd love to hear what you thought of that. And if you have any questions, if you want to discuss this further, then please, as I say, use the Get in Touch button on the middle of your screen. You'll be able to make that online booking with myself. Thank you all for your thank yous. Thank you for getting involved in the chat box. These sessions are never the same unless you get involved and interactive. Please feel free to follow me on LinkedIn, Twitter, or Crowdcast, because there I do try to share a lot of good practice, try to keep you inspired with some of these changes. And as a result of signing up today, you will automatically be added to my distribution list. So you will also receive emails from me with some helpful hints and tips, and you'll also be informed of my next webinars. Nuala, appreciate it is a lot to take in a short space of time, but if you find the opportunity, just moving forward, take that time to notice, and you'll be surprised what happens. Thank you everyone once again. Take care, and hopefully I'll see you joining me next month for next month's webinar, which is already on Crowdcast. And next month is all about April is Stress Awareness Month. So feel free to go along to either my web page, where you'll be able to register the event, or if you've followed me in Crowdcast, you'll be able to do that also. And so I'll be looking at burnout in relation to just stress, because April is Stress Awareness Month. So maybe you want to start thinking about what you could be doing in your organizations. So that's another thing to look forward to. Take care. Have fun. Bye.